Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto is the Pokémon champion in Pokémon. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Kyoka Suigetsu Totsuka and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Bonds Chapter 1. Wow, today is the day. A young lady with hair as vibrant as a Charmander's tail grinned as she looked up at her parents. I can't believe it's actually today. I've been waiting for so long. Her violet eyes, a shade she shared with her mother, glimmered with the same innocence and determination every young trainer would possess as she sped toward the large laboratory upon the hill, its windmill looking even more beckoning than usual. Slow down, Mito. The girl's father smiled at his baby girl and held onto her hand, ruffling her hair as she pouted. Her mother held onto Mito's other hand. The Pokémon aren't going anywhere and Professor Oak promised to let you have a Charmander. Namika's Kushina couldn't help but smile at how giddy and excited her daughter was being. She acted much more childish and innocent than her older brother. And we're still early. The official start of Pokémon Starter Day is for another 20 minutes. Mito was still pouting, I just want to meet my Charmander faster. Namika's Minato shared a smile with his wife before he patted his daughter's head. Be patient, Mito. I'm sure you and your Charmander will love each other just like your brother and his. Mito smiled, I hope so. Every year, Professor Oak, the foremost expert in Pokémon research, would take up the task of giving new trainers their starter Pokémon. As per tradition, the trainers in the Kanto region had a choice of a Charmander, a Bulbasaur, or a Squirtle, a fire type, a grass type, and a water type respectively. So, every year on the same day, many aspiring young trainers will visit Pallet Town in order to receive their first Pokémon from Professor Oak. It would be the first of many steps on the path of being a Pokémon trainer, and like many others, Namika's Mito was officially starting her journey. She had waited with great anticipation. Ever since she first saw Professor Oak give away starters a year ago, she had been counting the days. And after 365 pieces of chocolate won each day, she finally made it to her day. Just like her brother, she would get her own Charmander and start taking the world by storm. Although, while the girl was ecstatic, her parents weren't as comfortable. Kushina glanced at her husband, looked into his azure blue eyes, both conveying a silent message. They were both worried. Mito was not like her extremely determined and well-read brother whose sole purpose was to become the strongest. While Mito enjoyed her time with their pet Natsu, a young growler, then played around her friends, her brother was reading dozens upon dozens of books about Pokémon and battle strategy. By the time he was 10, he had most graduate students outclassed. Before he even received his Charmander, he had already planned which Pokémon he needed to catch and where he would catch them. He had lists of teams that he designed for each gym in the Kanto and even the Johto region. The boy had even planned out a schedule for when he needed to train to battle against the Elite Four. He was in a class of his own, and Mito, fortunately or unfortunately, wasn't like him at all. Deep inside, Kushina and Minato were a little relieved that only one of their babies was so aggressively determined. While they were extremely proud of what their son had achieved in such a young age, they knew what he went through in the process. You know, Mito, sweetie, you don't have to be a Pokémon trainer. Kushina tried her best to look innocent as she casually spoke her mind. You can always be more like your mother and become a Pokémon coordinator. We are not nearly as violent as trainers, and instead of hurting your Pokémon in battle, we make them very cute and pretty and have them perform amazing works of art. I know, Mom, but I want to try being a trainer first. Naruhina is a trainer and I want to see how it really is like. Minato wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders and kissed her cheek. It's okay, he whispered. She's our daughter. She'll be fine. He looked down at his baby girl, who was still giddy and oblivious. She's a smart and strong girl, just like her mother. Kushina sighed and rested against her husband. I guess so. It was a wonder on its own that Mito had such a normal childhood. As the daughter of the Benham and the Kiroi Senko, she was very lucky that the annoying reporters don't know about her or their little home in Pallet Town. Namika's Kushina wasn't a simple coordinator with several ribbons. She was the international champion with full collections of ribbons from every region. From Kanto to Kalos, nearly everyone would have, at one point or another, heard about the beauty of the Benham and her Pokémon. With a specialty with the color red, she outclassed all her competition with her flawless technique and unique style. Kushina had been voted the most beautiful woman alive for 3 years straight at the height of her career and was sought after by countless suitors all over the world. And 22 years ago, countless men around the world wept at the news of her marriage to Namika's Minato, one of the most well-known scientists in the world. The Kiroi Senko, a man many people were confused about initially. But after the Horatian teleportation systems were installed into every single Pokémon Center, Pokémart and Research Center in the world, everyone knew the name Kiroi Senko. Minato Namikaze had single-handedly changed the world with his invention and refaced reality in the Pokémon world. Because of Hurration, the number of saved Pokémon, the amount of sold goods and countless other statistics increased dramatically. He was personally proud that there was a 90% increase of Pokémon saved in the world. Perhaps it was his love for Pokémon, his passion for making lives better, or his handsomeness, but he managed to snag Kushina and made her his wife. The world was shocked at the announcement, but unfortunately for the press and fortunately for the newlyweds, that was the last the press ever heard from them. Kushina retired from professional competition and Minato moved from his research center, not to be heard from again. Well, up until a few years ago. Come on, Mom, Dad. Mito pulled her parents along as they reached the front of the lab, we're here. Kushina smiled, don't run on stairs, Mito. There were already a mass of people around the lab, most were parents of the other children waiting for the professor. All of Oak's trainees and assistants were busy running around the place and his 2 grandchildren were also present. Daisy Oak was busy grooming the Pokémon around the lab, making all of them as happy as possible. Gary Oak, on the other hand, was busy talking to a bunch of girls. After deciding to end his Pokémon trainer career a year ago and to start his life as a researcher, he had been helping his grandfather around the lab. Pallet Town was becoming increasingly lively nowadays. Hey, Kushina, Minato. The kind mother smiled down at Mito, and hello Mito. Hello Aunt Delia. The Namikazes smiled at their sweet neighbor, hey Delia. Kushina walked up to her best friend of 20 years with a beautiful smile, you're here too. Ash came home last night. Delia smiled excitedly, making her friend smile. He finished his journey in the Hone region and came back with some of his friends. Professor Birch and May and Max came to visit along with Misty and Brock. It's like a reunion today. Minato grinned, that sounds great. Where's Ash? Asked Kushina. Over here, Aunt Kushina. Ash Ketchum, a 14-year-old boy that grew up in the house right next to the Namikazes, ran up to his aunt and uncle. Uncle Minato. The boy had grown quite a bit since he left 4 years ago on his journey and stood at the height of Minato's shoulders. He was still wearing the same style of clothes, making the Namikaz smiled at his innocence. And Mito. Wow, I can't believe you're getting your Pokémon already. That's right, Ash. Mito grinned up at her childhood friend, who was still taller than her. And hi Pikachu. The electric mouse Pokémon chirped and jumped down to the girl's arms, Pikachu. Uncle, Auntie, let me introduce you. Ash gestured back to his friends with a smile, this is May and Max, the son and daughter of Normal, the gym leader of the Petalburg gym. And I think you've met Misty and Brock before. Nice to meet you all, replied Minato with a charming smile. Hello again, Mr. and Mrs. Namikaz, said Misty and Brock. Kushina nodded, but raised an eyebrow when she noticed May gawking at her with widened eyes. Her jaw was hanging open as she trembled in shock at the sight of Kushina, the baby Squirtle in her arms was looking up at her confused. Max was confused at first as well, but soon he realized what his sister noticed and his jaw swiftly fell. Why you May slowly raised a finger, why you are KK Kushina uses. I go by Kushina Namikaz now, sweetie. Misty and Brock chuckled at their reactions. They were the same when they first came to Pallet Town with Ash a few years ago. It was very hard to believe that the most celebrated Pokémon coordinator and the world's most wealthy scientist would be living so simple in a small town as Ash's next-door neighbor no less. Misty could still remember asking Kushina to give her some beauty tips and she still uses the techniques she learned that day. Perhaps she could get May to ask for some tips so she could listen in she didn't want to ask a second time. And of course, as an aspiring Pokémon breeder and doctor, Brock respected Minato greatly. He was so jealous that Ash got to grow up next to such amazing people. Max gulped and looked up at Minato, then that must mean you're Minato Namikaz. The blonde man chuckled, yes I am Max. It's nice to meet you. The boy shook one of his idol's hand, and nice to meet you too sir. I can't believe it. Cried May loudly, making her friends cringe. I've watched all of your performances on TV and I love all of them. May shook Kushina's hand with both hands, making the lady giggle at how cute she was. Where have you been for the last 20 years? Oh my gosh, you still look so beautiful and gorgeous. Minato chuckled and pulled his wife close, yep, she is. Mito gagged and shook her head, can we get our Pokémon now? Can I please have your autograph? Asked May, slightly calmer after Ash shushed her. Kushina smiled, of course May. May was practically gushing, I want to be a Pokémon coordinator as well, and it's really an honor to meet you, Mrs. Namikaz. She looked at the girl who looked a little younger than her who looked like a mini version of Kushina, and this must be your daughter. She's really pretty too. Max blushed a little as he looked at Mito. Sorry, I'm rambling. It's okay, sweetie. Kushina signed May's notepad and smiled when she hugged it close, and I'll give you some tips later. May nearly fainted and couldn't even reply. So how was the Hone region, Ash? Asked Minato with a small smile, I heard there are many amazing Pokémon there. It was really awesome, uncle. I love the Hone region. Ash smiled at May and Max, we made some great friends over there and added some strong members to our teams. The boy was so excited, it made Minato and Kushina smile, I'll show you them later in the lab. Great, I'll show you some new inventions as well. Max nearly passed out, see can I come too? Minato chuckled and patted Max's head, of course Max. Okay, everybody. Came the voice of Professor Oak, please come inside in an orderly fashion. We have many Pokémon prepared for all the young trainers today. Dressed in his usual lab coat, red shirt and khakis, the professor looked as intellectual and kind as usual, and his smile only made everyone feel at ease. Followed Daisy, Gary and myself, they will lead you all to the proper places inside. Mito grinned and tugged her mother's hand, yay, let's go. But for some reason, before everyone could even reach the doors, the ground started to shake violently. Professor Oak nearly fell down the stairs from the small quake and would have if Gary didn't grab his arm in time. Minato pulled Mito and Kushina into his arms and held them tight, but was looking around to see what in the world was causing the quake. Almost the entire crowd fell to the ground and started to scramble to their feet and away from the structures. Ash crowded with his friends as he held onto his mom, keep her safe, but the ground wouldn't stop shaking. Slowly, the shaking started to weaken, and the crowd managed to make their way to the open grass field. There were still constant tremors, but it was faint enough that most people could stand on their feet. But even from the field they could see that many things in the lab had been knocked off and broken, including many bookshelves and even some computers. Even the stacks of pokeballs were knocked over and were rolling all over the lab floor. All the other trainees inside the lab rushed out, carrying as many pokeballs as they could. Professor, it's happening again. Tracy, one of Ash's travel partners, rushed out with his drawing pad, looking pale in shock. But it's even more drastic than before. Now they're using earthquake attacks now. Barry groaned, damn, this is bad. What's going on, Professor? Asked Minato. Ash nodded along, yeah, is someone attacking us? Is it Team Rocket again? No, it's some of the Pokémon we keep in one of the fields. Professor Oak stood and dusted his jacket, they are extremely high-level Pokémon and we keep them in their own field, it is the largest field we have. It's at the very back of the property and is kept safely away from all the other Pokémon, but they have started to fight with each other recently. He gave Minato and Kushina a look, we tried calming them down with tranquilizers or with the hypnosis attack of other Pokémon, but they are far too skilled. We had already sent over a dozen Alakazam and Jengar to the Pokémon in the past week and we still couldn't do anything. The Pokémon we have here are nowhere near trained enough to keep all of them down, even Gary's. Barry scoffed, don't blame me. Whose Pokémon is it? Asked Ash, shocked that Gary's Pokémon couldn't do anything. Professor Oak sighed, it's Naruto's. It's Naruhina's. Kushina bit her lips as Minato sighed. It had been quite a long while since Naruto had come home, even to visit his family and Pokémon. It really wasn't a surprise that his Pokémon would start fighting. Not only had their master not been there for them for a long while, the very structure in which they were trained would make them clash. Naruto built the teams he had designed since he was a child and trained them independent of each other. Each team of 6 had a leader, the strongest of the 6, and it would lead and coordinate the rest of the group. They were built like cohorts, each with a centurion. And with Pokémon at such high levels, it would only be natural that they clash without their praetor. Ash nodded along, oh, now I understand. No wonder our Pokémon couldn't do much. Who is that? Asked May. Mito smiled a little sadly, my big brother. Wait, muttered Max. Wait. The boy was becoming increasingly loud and excited, if he's your brother that means he's your parent's son. Minato and Kushina pursed their lips as Mito sighed, his name is Naruto Namikaze. Oh my god, Naruto Namikaze. It was Max's turn to gush, I thought it was a fake rumor, but they said that Naruto Namikaze is your son. I can't believe it's really true. Who are you talking about? Asked May again. Max just looked at his sister annoyed, I can't believe you don't recognize the name. Naruto Namikaze, the previous Kanto and Johto region champion. The girl looked surprised and looked over at Minato and Kushina, champion. Misty and Brock were also shocked. Even they didn't know that Ash knew the previous champion of their region. They had never faced Naruto as gym leaders, but they had certainly heard from their respective father and siblings about how powerful and skilled he was. You mean you actually know him, Ash? Why didn't you tell us? You never asked, Ash said with a shrug before he smiled fondly and turned back to May. Naruto was the champion after he defeated the Elite Four a few years back. It had been a long time since Ash had seen his and Gary's childhood hero. Growing up next to Naruto was amazing. Not only did Ash get to watch him train all his starter Pokémon, he got to learn a lot as well. Ash will never forget the day he and Gary watched Naruto train 2 of his teams at once by having them battle each other. It was amazing to see perfection in the making. He grew up here in Pallet Town, but no one really knows about it. Max was giddy and was jumping up and down, he's the youngest champion in history. I did a whole report on him in school back in Petalburg. Professor Oak smiled and nodded, he was only 12 years old when he took the entire region by storm. He defeated every single gym in Kanto and Johto before he attended the Indigo League, and he beat every single opponent he came upon without losing a single Pokémon. And when he was 16, he used his right as the winner of the Indigo League to officially challenge the Elite Four. Only 16. And he won. May was shocked that she never heard of someone like that before. Yep. Max grinned, it was broadcasted live throughout the Kanto and Johto region and even a part of the Hone region. I watched it with Dad at home. Barry actually smiled, we all watched it too. The entire town was basically shut down when everyone decided to gather in the town hall to watch Naruto. He defeated Lorelei and Bruno almost effortlessly. The young Petalburg son recited the results like his favorite story, he challenged them to triple battles, which is much harder for a trainer. I thought the Elite Four would destroy him, but he somehow had these amazing original attacks and outclassed them. After 4 rounds of triple battles, he defeated the first 2 Elite Four. Minato smiled proudly at his son's accomplishments, even Agatha, the oldest of the Elite Four, didn't last too long against him. She managed to defeat some of his Pokémon, but he still won in the end. Then the 6-on-6 battle against Lance, said Ash with excitement. That was the best thing I've ever seen. I was standing the whole time. Even Dad was cheering next to me. Max laughed at his sister, to think that you and Mom missed it because you guys went shopping. May huffed as Mito grinned, my favorite is Naruhina's chain sky attacks. I prefer his instantaneous attacks, added Minato with a smirk. Kushina scoffed, you only like that because he named it after you Horatian. Wow, he sounds so amazing muttered May, wondering how this entire family was so awesome. Suddenly the ground started to shake again and was even stronger than last time. Everyone immediately sat down on the open ground and tried to wait it out, but the professor and all his assistants were worried for the structure of their laboratory. Then, to make matters worse, a loud explosion came from where the far fields were located. Blasts to fire and light could be seen from where the people were huddled, and Pidgey were scattering from the distant forests, all sensing a clash of titans. Other Pokémon from other fields were also starting to jump out of their fences and toward where the group was, all trying to run from the battle. Ash and Gary noticed some of their own Pokémon and went to gather them around. With 4 dozen Tauros, 1 large Snorlax, and countless of other Pokémon, the situation was not made better. Now, in the middle of the large grass clearing, a mass of people and Pokémon gathered, all trying to think of ways to stop the battle before it destroys the lab, or worse, the entire town. Tracy looked terrified, Professor, what should we do? Oak sighed, I really don't know. He looked over at Minato, who also wore a frown. Can you calm them down? You've met most of them and they know who you are. Maybe you and Kushina can command them. Minato sighed, it won't work. Naruto's Pokémon will only listen to Naruto. He's trained them to the extreme to that regard. No one but him will ever command them. The father of 2 could still remember the time when Naruto's Pokémon was guarding one of his laboratories and some thieves were stupid enough to infiltrate it. Those so-called Team Rocket goons were nearly killed by Naruto's Garchomp and would have died if Naruto hadn't stopped it in time. Kushina pursed her lips, I'll try calling him again. Their whole family had been trying to get a hold of Naruto for a long while and they had been calling his number extensively for the past few weeks. Mito really wanted him to see her first Pokémon and wanted him to come home for her birthday. The girl herself had called her brother countless times, but unfortunately, no one ever answered. I've been trying to call him for weeks already, though, so don't get your hopes up that he'll answer. With her red Pokenav, Kushina used her speed dial number 2 and it started to ring. Yep, still no answer. I think the battle is coming this way. Cried Ash loudly. The sonic boom nearly knocked everyone to their backs as a Garchomp blasted its way through the skies, its roar deafening. Its body casted a large shadow onto the ground as it spread its wings as it glared at his opponent hovering a small distance away. A ball of orange energy gathered in its mouth before he shot it higher into the sky. The orb of power blasted apart in small fragments and fell to the earth like meteors. It's Draco Meteor. Minato quickly pulled his wife and daughter close, we have to run. But the attack weren't meant for them and the blasts of energy were barreling at the very large Tyranitar standing strong behind the group. The massive and incredible strong Pokémon took the blasts head-on, creating a huge dust cloud and causing tremors to run through the earth. It roared back defiantly, not injured at all, its defensive power was far too strong. It charged its own orange energy in its mouth, but instead of Draco Meteor, it was Hyper Beam. The devastating beam blasted the dust cloud away and shot up to the sky, blowing away some clouds with its power. Garchomp growled and refused to dodge. Instead it charged up a Dragon Rage attack. The orange and blue beams collided and a huge shockwave was emitted. Mito was in awe as she looked up to see a maelstrom of energy that filled the morning sky. She knew that Garchomp and Tyranitar were no regular Pokémon. They were Pokémon trained by her brother for years and had power that stood nearly unrivaled in the Kanto and Johto regions. No regular Pokémon could cause such effortless destruction. But the realization just made her clear on how dangerous the situation really was. They could destroy Pallet Town on their own, not to mention that Garchomp and Tyranitar were both leaders of two of her brother's team cohorts and could command their subordinates if they wanted to. Barry stood and grunted, "Blastas, use Hydro Pump on Tyranitar." The grandson of Oak's strongest Pokémon were huddled around the group and it locked its cannons on the bigger, stronger and older Pokémon. "Blast!" It cried out as it shot two jets of water at the ground-type Pokémon. Tyranitar barely paid attention to the incoming attack and dodged it with speed that a Pokémon of its size shouldn't have. Gary watched on in shock and horror as Tyranitar was covered in electricity and blasted his Blastas with a thunderbolt. The bolt of yellow electricity tore through the ground and struck Blastas with blinding speeds. It sent Blastas flying through the air and into the ground, knocking it out with only one attack. Tyranitar seemed to scoff before he turned its attention back to Garchomp. Everyone was in shock as Gary ran to his starter Pokémon, Blastas. Misty and Brock ran after Gary to help, both worried for their own Pokémon. Ash gritted his teeth in frustration, knowing full well how powerful Gary's Blastas should be, one-hit KO. He was angry and knew he had to do something as well. Snorlax, full power Mega Punch on Tyranitar. "Ash, no," cried Minato. Max agreed, "Ash, that Tyranitar is far too strong." The ground shook as Snorlax sped toward Tyranitar, angry that it disturbed its peaceful sleeping and snacking time. Its fist glowed with energy and it cried out defiantly, "Lax." As if despite its opponent, Tyranitar charged its own Mega Punch with its left fist, its weaker fist, and only backhanded into Snorlax's attack. The sleeping Pokémon was immediately halted in its tracks and felt itself being forced back entirely. His attack didn't even hurt Tyranitar. Ash watched with widened eyes as his most physically powerful Pokémon was swatted away like a fly and was sent flying back into a tree, uprooting it as a result. "Snorlax!" cried Ash helplessly. May was trembling, Snorlax and Blastoise defeated with one attack. Minato stood and grunted, "We have to leave this place. It is too dangerous to stay here now." Mito held onto her mother's hand and was almost crying, Mom, why are Naruhina's Pokémon doing this?" "Don't worry, sweetie," said Kushina as she hugged her baby girl close, "they're just frustrated and they'll return to normal in a little while." The group was slowly migrating away from the battle, but with each clash of Tyranitar and Garchomp, tremors and shockwaves were sent blasting outwardly, knocking everyone down each time. And no matter which direction the group moves, it seemed that the battle would follow them. The scope and area of the battle was just far too wide, and with Garchomp's speed, there was just no way to escape its way. Mito and all the other young trainers were huddled with their parents, wondering if the older trainers could do something. But seeing how Gary and Ash's physically strongest Pokémon were knocked away like nothing, they didn't have much hope. Professor Oak was observing the battle closely and was trying to think of some solution. Garchomp's temper has always been bad and so has Tyranitar's, but for them to fight this seriously, something must have happened. There had always been small shoving and roughhousing, but none had ever been so devastating. Never had Garchomp been so agitated it had used Draco Meteor, nor had Tyranitar ever used its full-powered Hyper Beam. If that beam had struck the ground instead, the collateral damage would have been horrific. But no matter, we have to get out of their vicinity. Minato nodded, "I'm on it already." The blonde scientist was tinkering on his Pokenav and somehow managed to teleport a Pokeball to his hand. "This is my new invention. A portable teleporting device that can be installed into your Pokenav." Max, despite the situation, looked giddy at the invention. "But I'll explain more later." He threw the Pokeball on the ground, Alakazam. "Zack 'em. Teleport the people away." Alakazam could only teleport a maximum of 2 people at a time and Minato gestured to Mito and Kushina first. "Take Mito and Kushina back to the house." But before Alakazam could even walk over to its master's family, the ground shook again. "Hurry!" cried Minato as he fell to the ground. The shaking wasn't just tremors, it was one of Tyranitar's earthquake attacks, and it was at full power. "Minato, come here," yelled Kushina as she pulled her husband close, holding Mito with her other arm. "Alakazam, hurry up." Professor Oak fell and felt shivers when he saw what the 2 powerful Pokémon were preparing. "We have to run, now. They're both charging a Giga Impact." True to the professor's word, Tyranitar and Garchomp were both glowing and a wild torrent of energy warped around their bodies. Garchomp swooped down to the ground and, with a burst of speed, charged forward with another sonic boom attacking at the speed of sound. Tyranitar, on the other hand, charged as fast as it could, and while it was not nearly as fast as Garchomp, it used its massive mass to raise its momentum. In a split second, Dragon met ground. But for some reason, there was no impact explosion. Whew, that was close. The group all had their heads down, preparing for the impact, but slowly started to look up at the lack of explosion and the new voice. Is everyone okay? The voice sounded worrisome and concerned, but was also relieved. I'm so sorry about those two. Minato and Kushina stared up at the owner of the voice with widened eyes, and Naruto. Two separate but equally loud booms sounded out from the distance, one from the west and another from the east. The newcomer, with spiky blonde hair that was very much like Minato's, but had shorter bangs. He looked a lot like Minato as well, but had Kushina's rounder face and eye shape. Wearing a pair of grey jeans held together by a white belt, a pair of clean black sandals, and a simple black sleeveless shirt with an orange whirlpool design, Naruto, the previous champion of Kanto and Johto, and the most famous prodigy in the Pokemon world, smiled down at his family lovingly. "Naruhina!" cried Mito as she jumped from the ground and into her older brother's arms. The young Namikaze laughed and lifted his baby sister into his arms, hugging her close and tightly. "Oh, I've missed you so much, Mito." He kissed Mito's forehead as he placed her on the ground, "And you've grown so tall. You're nearly reach my shoulder now." Mito had tears welling in her eyes as she clutched onto her brother's shirt. "I've missed you too, Naruhina." "Naruto Namikaze!" cried Kushina as loud as she could before she slammed a fist onto her son's head. "Where have you been for the past 2 years? You say you like to travel around, but you don't call your parents or return their call. What sort of son are you? That is not how we raised you." Minato also looked stern as he stood to face his son. "Your mother is right, Naruto. We were worried and you should have at least replied to our calls." Naruto merely nursed his head with a sheepish smile. "I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, but you know how bad I am with these things." He smiled and pulled his mother into a hug and reached for his father's arm. "I lose my Pokenav every day, and sometimes I just forget stuff when I'm concentrating." Kushina wrapped her arms around her baby boy and Minato patted his shoulder, both emotional. "But I remembered to come back today." He smiled at Mito, who was still holding onto the back of his shirt. "I would never miss Mito's 10th birthday and see her get her first Pokemon." "You're not leaving for at least a month, you hear me?" ordered Kushina crying. Minato nodded. "Yes, you're staying at home." Naruto chuckled and shrugged. "Sure, happy to." He hugged his mother tighter and smiled at his father. "I've missed everyone." "Naruto," muttered Professor Oak with a soft smile, "it's good to have you back." "It's good to be back, old man." The champ chuckled at the destruction around the area. "Sorry about Sora and Tsuchi. I didn't know they'd cause so much trouble and danger for everyone." Naruto finally caught sight of Ash and Gary, and wow. Mito isn't the only one who grew up. Ash and Gary are young men now. Ash smiled up at his childhood hero. "It's good to see you, Naruto." "Yeah, it's about time you got back," muttered Gary with a smirk and crossed arms. "Where did Garchomp and Tyranitar go?" wondered Misty out loud. Naruto smiled at the girl and snapped his fingers. "I sent them away. They both just crashed into the ground over there." There was a flash and Garchomp and Tyranitar were back, both tattered with dirt and clearly still angry. They were growling at each other and were still in fighting stances, but the Espion and Umbreon standing next to them and their paws on them, just in case. "Yami and Hikari are very fast and precise," said Naruto, gesturing to Umbreon and Espion respectively. They both trailed behind Sora and Tsuchi and barely teleported them out. Naruto patted his Umbreon's head proudly. "Sora is my fastest Pokemon, and Yami almost didn't make it in time." Thankfully Yami was smart enough to teleport near Tsuchi to catch up to him. Max looked at the Umbreon in awe. "Wow, such skill in teleportation." Tyranitar and Garchomp started to snarl louder. "Both of you, stop it right now." Immediately, the two titans were silenced and stepped away from each other. "Come here." They both bowed their head, looking almost sorry as Naruto glared at them. "I am very disappointed in both you. I don't care who did what. Both of you put everyone in danger, and that is not how I trained you." Garchomp and Tyranitar bowed their heads even lower, just like they would when they were just Gible and Larvitar. "Now get back to the field and stay there. Neither of you will be having dinner tonight." Begrudgingly, they both slumped back into fields, neither raising their heads. "And if I find either of you causing any more trouble, I will let Amaterasu teach you both a lesson." For some reason unknown to the others, Tyranitar and Garchomp slumped faster away. Max looked up at Naruto with stars in his eyes. Wow. Misty, Brock and May were all shocked at how Naruto could tame such powerful Pokemon so easily it was as if they were puppy growled. But they were all also surprised that Naruto was so carefree and casual. They were all expecting him to be much more serious and intimidating. His reputation too around Kanto certainly made him out to be a scary and ruthless character. Naruto turned back and smiled when Mito ran to hold his hand. "Well, what did I miss?" Professor Oak chuckled almost awkwardly. "I guess we should get back to giving out starter Pokemon." Kushina and Minato smiled and looked at each other. "Our son is home." Bonds Chapter 2. Here we are, everyone. After a brief hour of cleaning up, Professor Oak's laboratory was properly presented to the group of trainers and their families. All the files and pokeballs were back onto their proper shelves, but most of the computers were cracked and shattered, leaving the normally high-tech desk scarce of screens. Fortunately, the overall infrastructure of the building was intact and none of the walls were cracked, though parts of the ceiling were void of tiles and some of the hanging light fell to the floor. But ultimately, all of the starter Pokémon were all perfectly intact in their Pokeballs and could be given out. Naruto scratched the back of his head. "I'm so sorry about all the mess, old man." The professor laughed it off and waved his hand. "It's okay, Naruto. None of the important things are harmed." He draped his lab coat over the back of his desk chair and smiled at the crowd as they surrounded the stack of Pokeballs. "And I've always wanted to show these kids some proper Pokémon before they get theirs, and this year it actually happened. Tyranitar and Garchomp are definitely very powerful and well trained when their trainer is present, but regardless, they are of extremely high levels." Professor Birch smiled along and nodded. "I'll say. Normal hyper beams, even from a Tyranitar, wouldn't have such destructive power." The younger professor recalled seeing clouds being blown away by the strong attack and remained in awe. "I would go on a whim and say the Tyranitar is nearly at the peak of its potential. It is as strong as a Tyranitar could be." Max grinned and nodded. "Totally. The Draco meteor of Garchomp was gigantic and Tyranitar's hyper beam was strong enough to reach beyond the clouds. That's way beyond what normal attacks like that could do." Mei smiled. "They are trained by the Kanto and Johto champion, after all." "Can we get our Pokémon now?" asked Mito loudly as she hopped up and down. "Yes, we'll start right now." Professor Oak smiled at the girl and nodded as he gestured to the Pokeballs. "Here are the choices again, kids," recited Professor Oak as he looked down at the group of excited new trainers. "There are 3 basic types of starters here. Bulbasaur, a grass-type Pokémon, Squirtle, a water-type Pokémon, and Charmander, a fire-type Pokémon. Each of these Pokémon are easier than most to train and have already been taught to listen to their trainers, and they each have very powerful evolved forms." Mito was eyeing the Pokeball placed in front of the picture of a Charmander. She had already made up her mind years ago when she found out that her brother started out with a Charmander. She had seen Naruto battle with his Charizard and how amazing it was. Mito wanted to have something like that, not only a powerful partner, but also a close friend. Not to mention that she'd seen her brother ride of his Charizard's back and soar through the skies that made her want a Charmander more than anything. Mito would like nothing more than to feel the clouds run through her hair as the world passed unceremoniously beneath them. And of course, the baby Charmander she met a few weeks ago in the lab was the cutest Pokémon she'd ever seen. "Some of you have already told me your choice weeks in advance, so I've reserved each of you your requests." Professor Oak smiled at the daughters of the Namikaze family and gestured to her. "Mito, come here." Kushina and Minato smiled proudly as their baby girl will run up to the professor, giggling excitedly as she clapped her hands together. "Do I get my Charmander now?" she asked loudly, making the others chuckle. Oak smiled and nodded. "Yes, you do." He placed Charmander's Pokeball in Mito's hands and ruffled her hair. "I am happy to give you your first Pokémon, Mito. Be sure to take care of it with love and care." "I will." Mito threw the Pokeball into the air and it let loose a white light. A very young Charmander fell from the air and Mito caught it in her arms, laughing as she hugged it close. "My Charmander." "Char," purred the Pokémon as it snuggled into its master's chest. Professor Oak smiled fondly at the sight. "This Charmander is a female and she is one of the best behaved Pokémon in the lab." Ash, along with his friends, stood further back in the room but all had smiles on their faces. Most of the group were reminiscing back to the times they each received their own first Pokémon. Be it from Pallet Town, Cerulean City, Pewter City or Little Root Town, they were all fond memories that their owners would never forget. Like many other firsts in life, starter Pokémon will forever be a huge part of a person's life. Max, looking on with envy, could only wish for his own 10th birthday to arrive quicker. "Hey girl," whispered Mito as she slowly walked back to her family, "I'm going to name you Benahim, after you, Mom." "Thank you, sweetheart." Minato stood behind Kushina and wrapped his arms around her as she rested back against him. Even without seeing his wife's beautiful face he knew that she had tears welling in her eyes. They were both extremely proud at their baby girl, who looked so happy and giddy holding her small Pokémon in her arms. After listening to Mito talk about how she'd care and love her little Charmander, actually seeing her hold one in her arms was heartwarming. Unfortunately, this also meant that the start of Mito's Pokémon journey was about to begin, and Minato and Kushina weren't sure if they'd be happy about having her so far from home. Naruto stood next to his parents and smiled at his baby sister. The scene reminded him of his own starter Pokémon. "Congratulations, Mito." Kushina pulled Mito into a hug and kissed the top of her head, almost squishing the small Charmander in between them. "I'm so proud of you, Mito." Minato joined the hug and kissed his daughter's head as Kushina sniffled. "You're going to be a great trainer." Mito smiled up at her parents before she turned to her brother, Narunai, can I see your Charizard? Naruto understood his sister's reasons and patted her head, sure, I'm sure the others will as well. As someone who grew up in Pallet Town, Naruto knew exactly how well prepared and sufficient were Professor Oak's designed fields for Pokémon. In his younger years, Naruto had worked around the professor's fields and took care of many Pokémon, studying their behavior and habitat. In fact, the young Namikaze had designed several fields of his own, including the field his own Pokémon currently used. From the size to the type of ground, to the height and kind of trees, to the amount of wild fruit around the area, to the penthouse levels of the water, to even the amount of noise that could reach in. Since he had already planned out his teams of Pokémon before he actually caught them, he had prepared his fields accordingly. I've never actually been back here before, muttered Ash as he looked at the thick forest. Most of the young trainers and their parents left. The last thing they wanted was to go anywhere near the two Pokémon that nearly killed them. Mito, holding on to Naruto's hand, skipped along as they made their way to the field. Kushina and Minato were right behind them, smiling at the closeness of their babies. It had been a very long time since Mito had seen Naruto, and as a little sister who looked up at her brother as a hero, they weren't surprised that she was clinging so close to him. Ash and Max were constantly looking around, trying to catch sight of any of Naruto's Pokémon, but none were showing up. Where are your Pokémon, Narunai? Mito asked as she held her little Beniham under one arm. Just over there in that clearing. Naruto led the way through the thick forest and soon a large clearing. It was narrow at first, but expanded to twice the size of the other fields. All the grass were neatly cut and there were large patches of flowers that delighted the entire field. Scents of daffodil and lilies floated around the air and there was a soft breeze carried them throughout the field. It was almost nothing like the other fields. This was a controlled environment. It was more like a natural forest clearing. Where are they? Asked Max. Kushina and Minato smiled at the sight and held each other's hand. Naruto patted Mito's head before he stepped ahead, smiling as he stepped further into the clearing. Everyone wait here for now. I need to go in first. Mito tilted her head as she hugged Beniham close to her chest. In where? Before Naruto or anyone else answered, Mito was shocked to see her brother vanish before her eyes. Whoa, where'd he go? Asked Misty and May oddly in sync. Ash and Gary, along with Brock and Tracy, all stepped forward and felt the air and were shocked to feel some sort of invisible barrier. It was as if most of the clearing was sealed off by some invisible wall. It's a barrier, muttered Tracy, it must be generated by some psychic Pokémon. But to conjure such a large and invisible barrier, it must be a powerful one. And the barrier actually visually blocks the scenery inside, so it must be coupled with some sort of hypnosis attack. Tracy looked back at the professor, this is why we always leave the food outside of the forest. No one can even go into the clearing. Professor Oak smiled and nodded with crossed arms, yes, it is quite fascinating. I almost never see such a diverse group of Pokémon form their own small society. Perhaps it is because of the way Naruto had trained his Pokémon, but they have their own hierarchy and a complete chain of command. Wow, that's amazing, whispered May in wonder. Mito looked at her parents, so Narunai is inside with his Pokémon now. Minato nodded as he patted his daughter's head, yes, they teleported him inside. The Namikaze patriarch had been one of the first to hear his son's theory on a new large barrier dome, and he had been fascinated by it ever since. To think that one Pokémon could, on a long-term basis, maintain such a taxing technique his son's Pokémon were truly amazing. Your brother's Pokémon don't like to associate much with other trainers' Pokémon, and they like their privacy, so they live inside this dome. Minato also knew that his son had always kept his training techniques closely guarded secrets, and the dome was a nice way to keep people from spying on him. So can we go in? Asked the young Namikaze girl. Kushina nodded, yes, I think your brother will let us in soon. Suki Naruto whispered as a sad smile appeared on his face, come here. The beautiful Gardevoir had tears welling in her eyes as she teleported in front of her trainer and jumped into his arms. As one of Naruto's very first Pokémon in the Hone region, Suki had always been one of Naruto's favorites, and he had truly missed her. Watching her grow from a shy little Ralts to a pretty Kirlia, then to a beautiful Gardevoir made Naruto almost feel like a father. She was definitely one of his Pokémon princesses, and definitely had the power to be one of his team leaders. Guard, sobbed the Pokémon as she snuggled into her trainer's shoulder. Naruto wrapped his arms around his princess and kissed the top of her head, I'm sorry it took me so long to come back, but I've missed all of you. He patted Gardevoir's head and looked around at the beautiful clearing, and you've clearly kept up our training. The illusion barrier looks great and works even better than before. Gardevoir still had tears in her eyes, and Naruto brushed them away, don't worry, I won't be going away anymore. I am going to stay with all of you, and if I go traveling again, I will bring all of you with me. Suki nodded, Gardevoir. Now, let's get the others out here. Naruto, with Tsuki still holding onto his arm, walked forward and smiled, "Come on, everyone, get out here." It happened in a split second, the bright flash of white light that enveloped the area. But there was no surprise from Naruto. He knew exactly what was happening. He had spent weeks training all his Pokémon for such a dramatic entrance many years ago, and he had always loved it. He wouldn't have admitted it back then, but one of the main reasons he placed a psychic type within most of his teams was for such entrances. Perhaps it was his father's influence, but he thought teleport was one of the most practical, yet flashy moves to use, and entrances couldn't be better with it. He smiled as his 6 teams appear in front of him in splendor. Standing at the forefront was his first team. A magnificent Gyarados, along with 2 glorious Pidgeot, a grinning Jengar, and 1 stoical Alakazam, all stood proudly despite their lack of leadership. All the other teams fanned out to the sides. Naruto's second team. A Dragonite, a Dragonair, an amazingly red Gyarados, a Meganium, a Scizor, and a Sneasel. Then his third, Suchi, his recently angered Tyranitar, stood in front of his subordinates a Blastoise, 2 Arcanine, an Aerodactyl and a Steelix. Then was his home team. The leader a Salamence along with a Blaziken, a Flygon, a Metagross, and an Absol. Gardevoir also belonged to this team, but she was still holding on to Naruto's arm. His next team was led by Sora, the Garchomp, and despite his slight wounds, he stood proudly in front of his troops. An Infernape, 2 Medicham, a beautiful Melodic, and a Luxray all looked proud. And finally, the 6th team was led by a Gudra. A Haxorus, Hydreigon, 2 Greninja, and Gallade followed behind. "Oh, come here." It may have been a mistake to teach some of his Pokémon teleporter agility, because they all rammed into him and knocked him into the ground. Itachi, his Sneasel, was the first and attached itself to his head, just like he would when they traveled through Johto. Then it was Meganium, her name was Midori, and she knocked him onto the ground, but that didn't stop her from licking his face. Beanie and Shiro were next, his twin Arcanine, and they, along with Midori, made his face dripping wet. Then Naruto felt something slither under him, and he was giddy to see his Aoiheim, his Dragonair, wrap herself around him with a cute smile. He was laughing as all his buddies, pals, princesses, smothered him with affection. It had been a long time, and he really missed all of them. Goo. Naruto laughed harder as Gudra, with his usual big smile, pounced onto the group, covering everyone with goo. Goo, Gudra. Naruto hugged his happy dragon close. "I missed you too, Seiken." Blastas, muttered Mizukage as he sprayed the group with a jet of water, cleaning away the goo. Hazakiri and Kazakiba, his twin Pidgeot, made a vortex of wind around the group and dried everyone. "Oh, I missed you all so much." Absol, named Shiki, nuzzled against his leg, making Naruto smile and scratch his neck and pat his head. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back, but that's the last time I'm leaving for so long." The blonde rested onto the soft scales of his Melodic and smiled at every one of his Pokémon. "From now on, I'll spend a lot more time with all of you." He looked at Tsuki with a soft smile. "Now, release the barrier, Tsuki." In an instant, his family along with the others were all standing behind him, looks of shock and awe on their faces. All of Naruto's Pokémon were standing in formation the moment the barrier fell, each leader standing proudly in front of their subordinates. It was as if they had been trained to appear as formidable and intimidating as possible in front of other people, even if it was their master's family and friends. Wow, muttered May as she stared at the sight in awe. It was almost overwhelming to think that every Pokémon in front of her was probably just as strong as the clashing Tyranitar and Garchomp. Ash and Gary were thinking along the same lines, but they were also comparing their own Pokémon to Naruto's. They had some of the same Pokémon, but they could clearly tell that Naruto's were at much higher levels. It wasn't just because of their physical fitness or size, but was also their powerful disposition. It was as if they all had some sort of hidden power that revealed to everyone that they weren't regular Pokémon, they were the pinnacle of Pokémon development. "Look at all of them," cried Max giddy as he jumped forward a little. Professor Oak smiled and crossed his arms. "I've always loved how they all stand in formation whenever they meet someone new." "Yes, it is fascinating," agreed Professor Birch, "and it is good to see that you also have a lot of honed Pokémon." He clearly noticed that Gardevoir was the one who was responsible for the barrier dome, which was already impressive, but the others looked awesome as well. The Blaziken, Flygon, and Metagross looked very healthy, and it was always nice to see a trainer with an Absol. "Wow," he muttered as he noticed the other Pokémon. "You also have Pokémon from Sinnoh, Unova and Kalos." Naruto smiled and patted Seiken's head. "Yes, I've traveled around before I challenged the Elite Four, and I've had these teams since I was 15. Mito tugged on her brother's hand. "Naruhina, what about your Charizard?" The ex-champion smiled at his baby sister and nodded. "He's right here." He reached for one of the Pokeballs attached to his belt, but unlike the rest, it wasn't red and white, it was completely black with a white center. And when his other Pokémon noticed him reach for it, they all seemed to stand up taller and become more serious. "Come on out, Amaterasu." The usual white light came out of the pokeball and a tall figure emerged from it. Char. Its light grunt sounded like a roar and made Max and May step back from shock, and soon a magnificent Charizard stood proudly in front of everyone. Instantly, everyone knew that this was no normal Charizard, it was a lot bigger and taller. It was also a darker shade of orange, and its flame was much more intense and large. It was so hot the group felt a little uncomfortable standing around it. The professors were also surprised to see Tyranitar and Garchomp bow their heads and avoid the gaze of Naruto's first Pokémon, as if they were afraid that they were in trouble. Though, everyone's attention were mostly drawn toward the eye patch Amaterasu wore on its left eye and a long scar that stretched from the corner of that eye down to its left cheek. Benham squirmed a little in Mito's arms and whimpered as she looked up at Amaterasu. "See, Char. Relax, you guys." Naruto reached up and patted his oldest friend's neck, "He's really friendly and would never hurt you." Amaterasu looked down at Benham and reached down with his claws, only to pat her lightly on the head. Naruto smiled and Mito giggled, "See, he's strong, but friendly." Kushina and Minato smiled and stepped up to their children, "That's really sweet." Mito looked up at Amaterasu with a smile, "So this is what a Charizard looks like." It had been a long time since Mito had seen her brother's starter Pokémon in person. She saw him on television when her brother's battle with the Elite Four was broadcasted, but the last time she saw Amaterasu in person, he was probably still a Charmeleon. "Well, it looks a lot bigger than Ash's Charizard," muttered Misty as Brock nodded in agreement. Naruto smiled, "Yes, Amaterasu continued to grow after he evolved, and as he grew stronger, he grew bigger as well." "So are these all your Pokémon, Naruhina?" "Not at all," replied the blonde with a smile, "these are my main teams, and each are based on an individual region. I trained these teams specifically to battle against Pokémon gyms and the Elite Four." Naruto held onto Mito's hand and led her further into the clearing, "The rest are over here." The others followed behind along with the 6 teams, and they walked into an even larger clearing, and the group was once again shocked at the sight. There were no teams or overwhelming Pokémon, but it also looked nothing like a Pokémon laboratory field. "Hey guys!" cried Naruto loudly. At his call, hundreds of Pokémon of all range and sizes rushed over to Naruto, all giddy and happy at the sight of their master. But these were not the insanely trained titans like the ones of the teams, they were almost like wild Pokémon. Almost immediately, Twin Pichu latched themselves onto Naruto's head and nuzzled into his hair. Dozens of Nidoran male and female Rattata, Pidgey, Growlithe, Vulpix surrounding Naruto and all tried to jump up at him. Humming and a little slower were amazingly several Dratini, and one of them was pink. Mito couldn't even hold herself back and ran to pick it up, gushing as the small dragon whined when it couldn't reach Naruto. "Holy smokes!" cried Max as loud as he could, "there must be hundreds." May and Misty were in titters as hordes of Butterfree and Bodifly surrounded them. "Wow, I love this place." The girls, along with Max and Brock, all walked into the group of Pokémon and enjoyed their affections. "They're all so friendly and cute." Brock was in awe at the amount, "I wonder how many Pokémon are here." "Just under 600, to be exact." Professor Oak would check each of the Pokémon every day, and he knew the numbers better than anyone. Ash and Gary were staring further down into the clearing and saw more Pokémon coming, and there were some very rare Pokémon in the crowd. They aren't just normal wild Pokémon one would find around normal areas. Some of the Pokémon here are very rare, like the Dratini, especially the pink Dratini. Kushina walked up to Mito and gave her son a look, "I can't believe you were hiding this little beauty from me." The pink Dratini purred as Mito and Kushina petted her head and started to make her way up Mito's arm, "She is so precious and cute." Dratini nuzzled into Mito's long hair and seemed oddly comfortable nesting on her head, "Oh, and she likes you, honey." Naruto smiled and nodded, "Yeah, she does like you, Mito." The girl giggled and patted the Dratini as Benham reached up higher to see it, "I really like her too." "Then how about you keep her?" Mito was shocked and looked up at her brother, "Really?" Misty, May and Max all looked envious as Naruto nodded, "Yeah. I'm not training her at the moment and I already have a Dragonite and a Dragonair in my teams." He patted Dratini's head and smiled, "She seems to like you a lot and I'm sure you can use another Pokémon to train. Having 2 Pokémon trained together is always better for a trainer." He smiled at his sister, "So how about it? You want to keep her?" Mito grinned and nodded, "Of course I want her." "Thanks, Naruhina." "No problem." Naruto ruffled Mito's hair before he stepped further out onto the field, looking around at the wide open space. "But before I forget, I have to show my new Pokémon this place." Minato smiled, "What kind of Pokémon did you catch?" Naruto chuckled at his father before he threw 4 Pokeballs onto the ground, letting out 4 beams of light. "Well, these aren't like my older Pokémon." A Glaceon first appeared and quickly smiled up at Naruto, but was not as quick as the Jolteon who hopped into his arms. A Miltank was next to appear, and next to it was a Vanillite, and both of them looked delighted to be set free. "I don't use them to battle at all, well, I haven't battled in a long time anyway." "Oh, she's really cute," cooed Kushina as she held the glaceon, making her purr as she scratched it behind her ears. Naruto knelt down and patted Miltank's head. "They are very well behaved and make the best ice cream in the Unova region." Minato and Kushina both looked confused, but Naruto continued, "That's what I've been doing. I opened my own little ice cream shop in Burbank City, and business is booming." Mito stared up at her brother. "You're selling ice cream?" "Yep. It's quite fun and relaxing." Minato smiled at his boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Well, that's one way to enjoy life. It's better than what your grandfather does, at least." Naruto chuckled, "Definitely." He smiled at the group. "Hey, feel free to play with the Pokemon, but I need to speak with Professor Oak for a second." His parents gave an almost sad look, but ultimately decided to leave things be. "It is okay, old man." Mito looked up at her brother confused, but remained silent. She knew her brother had his own schedule. Professor Oak sighed at his nickname and nodded, "Sure, come with me." The professor knew exactly what Naruto wanted when he asked for his attention and quickly led him back into the laboratory. It had been quite a long time since Naruto had checked up on their age-old project, but the elderly man wasn't surprised it had been so many years. He doubted it would ever come to any results. Nonetheless, it had been Naruto's most concentrated project since he was a child and it was deeply connected to him, so the professor understood. "So, an ice cream store, Naruto." Naruto smiled and nodded at his mentor. "Yep, I'll make you a cone later." Oak laughed and nodded. "I look forward to it." The Pokemon researcher looked at the boy he had watched grow up before his eyes and smiled sadly, "But if I may ask, are you still not battling?" Silently, Naruto shook his head, looking rather stoic. Professor Oak sighed and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "It has been 4 years already, my boy. What happened that day was a tragedy, but it was not your fault. There was no way you could have predicted such a consequence. Amaterasu lost an eye that day, and his Pokemon died." Naruto brushed his hair back and sighed. "No Pokemon battle should cost the life of any Pokemon. You have to learn to let go. You are far too young to be carrying such baggage." Just like 4 years ago, Professor Oak noticed that Naruto lacked the fire he had in his eyes since birth. "You are truly the most talented trainer I have ever seen in my life, and it is a shame that you no longer train for battle. Your 6 teams are still in tip-top shape, and they all yearn for battle." The professor looked ahead and reached for his card key. "You have a gift, Naruto. No amount of luck or good fortune could ever allow a 12-year-old boy to beat every gym leader in 2 regions without ever losing once, and it should be impossible for the same boy to beat the Elite Four consecutively with such ease. Don't waste it. This gift made me a killer, so I hope to not use it." He had gotten used to it after 4 years of no Pokemon battles. All was silent as Professor Oak unlocked one of many steel doors in the laboratory and they both stepped inside, both looking at the lone Pokemon egg that sat still under a warm light. It was the only specimen inside the large room and there were many computers attached to it. It showed a steady heartbeat on the monitors and Naruto smiled softly as he placed a hand on the egg, tracing his fingers along the whirlpool patterns on the white shell. "It's been a long time," whispered Naruto to the egg. In a way, the egg was Naruto's first Pokemon. According to his parents, on the day he was born, this egg mysteriously appeared and ended up next to him in his crib. He was still a baby, but had his arms wrapped around the egg protectively, and since then, Kushina and Minato had allowed Naruto to keep the egg like pet. They had all thought it would hatch within a few weeks, but much to the confusion of the Namikaze family and the fascination of Professor Oak, it never did. The professor had ran countless amount of tests on the egg and he couldn't find the slightest hint of its species. All they knew was that the egg was still alive and still had the ability to hatch, but for some reason, it just wouldn't. "Since you're staying for a while, I think you should talk to the egg more." Naruto nodded and picked up the egg. "I definitely will." Suddenly, a vision flashed before his eyes and he saw a shadow of a Pokemon. Lugia, the image and voice disappeared like a whisper in the wind and he just shook his head. "Come on, old man, I'll make you an ice cream cone." Bonds Chapter 3. "Home sweet home, indeed," muttered Naruto softly to himself with a smile. As champion, Naruto had been to many places around the world and had lived in the most luxurious villas with the most gracious hosts, but none had ever made him feel quite at peace and cozy than his small family home. Perhaps he inherited it from his parents who were both extremely wealthy, especially with his dad being the inventor of one of the most used technologies in the world, but he preferred a small and warm home. No halls of endless marble flooring or grand chandeliers could amount of his father's self-made hardwood flooring and his mom's favorite picture-decorated walls. Every trip up the stairs or through the living room was like reliving his wonderful childhood looking at pictures his parents had carefully chosen and framed to preserve their precious moments. A sudden vibration from his pokenav broke Naruto from his thoughts. "I was wondering when she'd text me." "Narinai." Naruto closed his pokenav and looked back at his baby sister, who was looking at him confused. "Why are you standing in the kitchen?" The blonde chuckled and ruffled Mito's hair. I'm going to make you guys some ice cream. Really? Chirped the girl with a grin, awesome. Naruto released Glaceon and Melting from their pokeballs and smiled as they nuzzled against him. Can you bring them outside to the patio, Mito? I'll meet you outside in a minute. Mito giggled and picked up Glaceon into her arms and patted Melting's head, sure thing. Follow me, guys. As soon as his sister was out of sight, Naruto opened his Pokenav again and smiled at the message. After living together for so long, it was a little weird making ice cream without her taking hours to decide which flavor she wanted. He was already missing her a lot. He wanted to see her cute thinking expression when she tried to decide chocolate or vanilla, waffle cone or a sundae, and watch her lick the cold treat with a happy smile. Oh well, I'll see her in a month or so. This is so good. Chirped Mito as she licked the heavenly cold treat. It's perfectly made, naruhina. Everyone, after a nice afternoon of playing with the Pokemon, enjoyed the nice weather and had a very nice dinner on the Namika's home's porch. The sun was starting to set and everyone decided to try some of Naruto's ice cream. Naruto chuckled and patted his Glaceon and Melting proudly, the credit all goes to Yuki and Chichi. The ex-champion had spent weeks learning from a local dessert chef and spent even more time trying to teach his Pokemon to make ice cream, and he finally succeeded if his booming business were of any indication. His store, Sweet Ice, had become a Burbank City local success story and many tourists would drop by whenever they visited the city. And if Naruto had any humans to thank, they would be the casting directors who decided to film Pokemon Princess Holiday and make his store one of the big parts of the film. They've gotten real good at making ice cream and they managed to master 5 new flavors in the past month. May was giddy as she snacked on her own cone, the vanilla is just amazing. I prefer the strawberry, but I have to say, the cone is wonderfully made as well. Brock smiled at Naruto and gave him an appraising nod, your pastry skill must be top-notch to make such crispy and layered cones. Thank you, Brock, Naruto replied with a sheepish smile, I did practice a lot. Kushina smiled at her son as she finished her own coconut-flavored cone, but couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness. Naruto looked perfectly happy and content on the outside, but the fact that he decided to open an ice cream store only confirmed the loving mother's concern. His refusing to battle with other trainers was only one of Naruto's way to avoid the memories of that day. Most of his way of dealing with his trauma was buried inside. Kushina was afraid that without some help, Naruto would have a very hard time. Her son making ice cream was only a way for him to distract himself, that Kushina was quite sure. Minato seemed to know what his wife was thinking and placed a hand on her shoulder, don't worry. I think this is a very healthy way to deal with things. The father knew that Naruto was very much like him and Kushina in the way that he wanted to have a simple life. That may not have been the case when he was a teenager, but after so many years of fame, fortune and traveling, Minato was sure that Naruto just wanted to lead a normal life. And he's always been a smart and strong boy. We don't have to worry about him. Kushina kissed her husband's cheek, I hope so. Here, girls, whispered Mito as she fed her Dratini and Charmander some ice cream, try some. So when are you going to start your journey, Mito? Asked Ash with a content smile, his Rocky Road ice cream happily digesting, and are you going to travel the Kanto region first? I'm going to start as soon as I can, and yep, I'm going to travel through Kanto. Mito looked happy, but her parents only looked worried, I can't wait to see all the different places. I've read about all the festivals and Pokemon gyms in all the different cities, and I think I want to go to Cerulean City the most and catch one of the water shows. Misty smiled, well I will be waiting for you there. Can't wait. Replied Mito. You know, started May, you can travel with us, Mito. The Namika's girl looked intrigued, we're going around the Kanto region now anyways. Ash is going through the battle frontier and I'm going to check out the contests. The brunette smiled, traveling is a lot more fun with a group of friends. I would love to, chirped Mito. Gives me a chance to beat Ash. Ash smirked, we'll see about that. Naruto finished cleaning up his ice cream equipment and sat down next to his sister around the patio table. If you're going to travel through Kanto, remember to buy yourself a nice fishing rod and catch yourself a nice Magikarp. Gyarados is a perfect partner for both Charizard and Dragonite, and if you ever want to try your hand at double or triple battles, they would be the way to go. Mito nodded as many other listened, and it wasn't every day that a champion would give away advice. Start training it as a Magikarp and it will be easier to control once it evolves, and you can have it battle against Dratini or Charmander to develop them all a little faster. Mito jotted down some mental notes as Minato turned to his son, so where are you going to go, Naruto? Kushina gave her husband a look after staying here for a while. Naruto shrugged, I hired some people and their Pokemon to look after my store in Burbank, so I'm pretty much free. Kushina gave her son a stern stare, you're staying at home with us for a while. And if you're going to be traveling, you're going to be traveling with us. Naruto chuckled sheepishly and nodded at his mother. It's been a long time since you've been on a trip with me and your father, and you're going to come with us next month. Where are you going? Asked Delia. Kushina gave a small smile. I was contacted by the National Pokemon Association a few weeks ago. Everyone turned to listen to the master coordinator. They are hosting the next grand festival in the Kanto region's Indigo Plateau, and it happens to be the 100th anniversary of the grand festival. May already looked delighted at the thought. They want to spice up the show, since it is going to be broadcasted live throughout all regions, so they asked if I wanted to be the special guest and give a performance that night. And you're going to do it? Cried May loudly. We get to see you perform. Kushina giggled and nodded, yep. It's been a very long time, but I still have some tricks up my sleeve. May grabbed Ash by the collar, we have to go there. Ash tried to calm his friend down and nodded, sure, I want to go too. We have 1 month before that happens, so let's try to get everything done before then. I'm sure we can make it. Minato held onto his wife's hand, but couldn't help but grunt. After more than 2 decades of marriage, his wife was still as beautiful as ever, and while he loved it, it would also mean that her old suitors will be trying to woo her again. He couldn't begin to voice his annoyance all those years back. Those god-forsaken male Pokemon coordinators would always think themselves as God's gift to women and would hit on them despite their boyfriend standing right next to them. Especially that Wallace individual. Minato was close to punching the man in the face for trying to hug Kushina. Yes, you're coming with us, Naruto. As far as Minato was concerned, his son was far better a trainer than he ever was, and if Wallace ever tried anything again, he'd send his son to take care of him. That flamboyant artist wouldn't stand a chance against his son. And bring your strongest team with you. Naruto scratched his head, sure, Dad. Kushina giggled and kissed Minato's cheek, you're cute. Okay, so we have to speed our way through the battle frontier, muttered Ash as he turned to May, Brock, Max and Mito. That should really be possible, and even if we don't finish in time, we can always head over to Indigo Plateau when the time comes and continue after the festival. May giggled, and if I'm lucky enough, I can get 5 Kanto ribbons in time, so I can participate in the grand festival. Hey, I want to try my hand at some gyms, too. Mito had heard about all the stories of her brother beating gym after gym without losing once, and she wanted to see if she could do it as well. I need some time to train, but I think we can stop at one gym in the next month. The grin on Mito's face only made Max blush and turn away. Brock smiled, I'm sure we can organize a schedule that can fit all these things. That sounds great. The Namikaze girl giggled, this is going to be really fun. Ash smiled back, traveling with friends is always fun. That brought a thought to Mito's mind, and she looked over at her brother. Hey Naruhina, did you ever travel with anyone? She had heard almost all her brother's stories from her parents, but none had really mentioned anything about any traveling partners. It would be quite interesting to know if he had any help on his journey. Did you meet anyone on your journey? Naruto smiled at the thought and nodded, yes, I did. The younger trainers all turned their attention to Naruto again. I only had one traveling partner, and we traveled together for 6 years. That long? Cried Mito, how come I've never met him? Not him, Mito. Minato smiled and patted his daughter's head, she was a girl. Yeah, but I didn't know you both traveled together for so long, muttered Kushina a little surprised. I knew you two traveled around Kanto and Johto, and I thought it ended there. Her son had always been a bit of an airhead when it came to calling his parents and telling them his location, but Kushina was shocked to know that her son's traveling companion had accompanied him for so long. I thought she went back to Sinnoh and competed in the Sinnoh League the same time you did the Indigo League. She did go back to Sinnoh, but we met up again after the competitions. Naruto rested back fully on his chair before he continued, the Indigo League only took a week and I still needed some Pokemon from the Hone region back then, so we decided to meet in Hone. We traveled through Hone, Unova and Kalos before we decided to part. I had to come back to challenge the Elite Four and she was doing the same in Sinnoh. Wait, added in Max, what do you mean she was doing the same in Sinnoh? Naruto sighed with a chuckle, she challenged the Sinnoh Elite Four the same time I did the Kanto and Johto. He couldn't help but laugh at the other's surprise. When we travel, we always use the gyms in the region to track our progress, and we got badges from all the gyms. She originated from Sinnoh and decided to compete with her badges in the Sinnoh League. He smiled at the memory of her battles, she won quite easily, if I remember correctly. Naruto saw that Max was starting to see the truth, we were both 14 by then, and we decided to take 2 years to train before we challenged the Elite Four in our respective regions. And after our journey, I came back to battle our Elite Four while she challenged Sinnohs. So it happened? Asked Ash, did she win? Naruto smirked and nodded, yeah, she did. Wait, started Brock, as she beat the Sinnoh Elite Four. Yeah. But that would mean stuttered out Misty as Naruto's smirk grew. She's Cynthia, the Sinnoh region champion. Cried Max as loud as he could as he jumped to his feet. May, Misty and Mito were all in shock as Max heaved rapidly, you two were traveling partners. Naruto brushed his fingers through his hair with a laugh, yeah, I'm really surprised that no one really knows about us. I mean, I sat in the coach viewing area when Cynthia was battling in the Sinnoh League and she was right next to me when I competed on Indigo Plateau. And we would usually challenge the gyms together, so most of the gym leaders in all the regions we visited should know. The shocked and awed looks on the young trainers' faces were missed by Naruto as he continued, we even conducted an interview together. Sure, we weren't champions back then, but I was certain that some reporter or journalist would discover the old footage and broadcast it. Minato chuckled as Kushina interrupted her son with a sigh, you should really be grateful for being so lucky, young man. Wait. Cried Mito, go back to the part where you traveled with Cynthia, the Sinnoh champion. The girl lightly punched her brother's arm with a small pout, why didn't you tell me? I honestly thought you knew, sis. No, I didn't. The young retard was hopping up and down as she looked at her brother, I can't believe you know one of my idols so well. How come you didn't bring her home? I really want to meet her. Mito had always looked up to powerful female trainers, especially the ones who received worldwide recognition. Cynthia was probably her favorite female trainer, narrowly beating out Diantha, the Kalo's region champion. When's the next time you'll see her? Naruto chuckled, not sure, he muttered while thinking, in about a month. Max slumped down on his chair, wow, I can't believe two of the youngest champions in the world actually traveled together for so long. You two must have some crazy training schedule or something, right? The boy had stars in his eyes at the prospect, so you have some sort of super secret to become super strong or something. Ash and the others looked excited at that, I mean, you both became champions and outclassed so many people when you're so young. Not really secrets, but we did always battle each other and get better that way. Naruto smiled at the reminder of all his battles with her, in all my travels, Cynthia is probably the hardest challenge I had to face. Her battling strategy is unlike anyone else I've seen and she has real passion about Pokemon. Her prowess in battle lies not only in the strength of her Pokemon, but in their bond as well. He chuckled, I haven't battled her in a long time, but her Garchomp isn't something to be taken lightly at all. Ash grinned, I'm going to travel in Sinnoh after the battle frontier. Maybe I'll have the chance to meet Cynthia and challenge her to a battle. Naruto nodded with a smile, then you better start training a dragon type or a strong ice type. Mito scooted closer to her brother, when did you meet Cynthia, Naruhina? We met in the Johto region when we were around 11 years old, 10 years ago. The others were once again surprised at how long the two champions had known each other. I wasn't exactly a polite young man back then, and I was quite arrogant. Kushina and Minato chuckled at the reminder, Cynthia and I got into quite the bad start and ended up battling out of spite. Flashback on. Again. Ordered a young man sternly, do not stop until you destroy that boulder. The Charmeleon growled as he rushed toward the towering boulder with his claws extended with a searing red glow. The dragon claws sliced into the boulder like a hot knife through butter, chipping away the large rock with each strike. Sounds of screeching rocks made the teenager cringe a little, but he felt powerful as his Pokemon tear away at their surroundings. And he could only smirk as his Charmeleon roared before he stabbed his claws deep into the boulder, blasting it into pieces at once. He had his own smirk on his face that reflected the one on his trainer and held his claws out proudly as they flared with power and heat. Good job, Amaterasu. The trainer brushed his long blonde hair back and fixed his short ponytail, but his front bangs were still spiky and uncontrollable. We're done today with Dragon Claw, he said proudly as he patted his Pokemon's head, smirking as his flame flared with pride. But I want to do more before lunch, so let's start Fire Blast early today. The climate of the Johto region was colder than Kanto, but the trainer had gotten used to it quickly. He had truly grown to enjoy the wild of the Sinnoh region, they have much larger natural obstacles that were suitable for powerful attacks. Instead of simple trees and small boulders, Amaterasu could use towering and wide small mountains to train. The wild Pokemon were also a lot more diverse in their own way and were nice opponents for his Pokemon, though only a few of them were worth catching a Larvitar and a Sneasel. They needed much more training before they could even compare to Amaterasu, but they had clear potential. So overall, his visit to Johto before he continued to the Indigo League was a very successful decision. Fire Blast at the boulder near the river. An inferno blasted from the fire Pokemon's jaws as he roared with power, and it tore through incinerating the short grass as it morphed into an all-consuming firestorm that enveloped the boulder. A shroud of steam blasted from the impact point instantly as the water around the boulder were instantly evaporated, and the trainer watched in anticipation as the steam settled, revealing a half-melted stone that was a fraction the size as it was before. Good, but we have to work until we melt the entire boulder. Amaterasu blasted the next boulder, but instead of melting, it was less sturdy and blasted to pieces. Do you mind? Cried a sudden voice from behind. The blonde turned around and saw a girl staring at him, looking a little angry and annoyed as she flicked her long blonde hair behind her. She looked to be around his age 10 or 11 and was really quite pretty, but the stern glare on her face was pretty annoying. She arched an eyebrow, crossed her arms and leaned on one side, looking at him as if he was a bug. "No, I don't." He turned around and ignored her. "Keep going, Amaterasu." "Hey, stop that." The girl stomped her feet angrily. "We're having our own training session over there and you're disturbing the peace." "What do you need peace for, bitching?" "What did you say?" He scoffed. "Oh, you heard me." He turned to face the girl and returned her steel gaze. "You do not come and demand anything from me, and if you're not happy about it, well that's too bad for you. You better shut up before I make you." He smirked. "And how are you going to do that?" The girl smirked and fell into a challenging pose, looking quite confident. For the first time, Naruto turned to face the girl, who was honestly very pretty wearing a pair of form-fitting jeans, a simple blue shirt and a white hoodie, especially with a row of pokeballs strapped to her glittery belt. "I will kick your ass, Pokemon battle or otherwise." She reached for a pokeball and threw it in front of her. "Gabite, battle dance." The dragon Pokemon growled as she stared down at Naruto, her fins and glowing with power. "The Gabite, huh?" he muttered as Amaterasu stood in front of him, returning the glare to the dragon type. "Quite a rare Pokemon in these parts. They are usually found in the Sinnoh region." The girl smiled. "Yes, we're from the Sinnoh region. Well, I'm from the Kanto region, and it's time to teach you a lesson, Sinnoh girl." The girl scoffed. "Boys are the same everywhere. I've been putting macho boys like you in your places since I was a child." He smirked as Amaterasu flared the flame on his tail. "We'll see." Flashback end. Another vibration from his pokenav made Naruto stop and turn his attention away from the group. Without letting the others peek over his shoulder, he checked the new message with a small smile on his face. He had expected her to text him often, but not about such menial things. He quickly replied her question of, "Where is the can opener?" "So who won in the end?" asked Mito urgently as Naruto paused. "Naruhina." Naruto put his device away and shrugged. "Honestly, we couldn't decide. Her Gabite was very strong, just as strong as Amaterasu back then. We continued to battle off and on again for the entire day, healing and healing our Pokemon. In the end we just called it a tie and went to the Pokemon Center." Flashback on. The clearing looked like a molten wasteland, and the river was nearly blocked by the burning debris that resulted from the long battle. The sunlight had disappeared hours ago, and now the only contributing light source were the burning patches of grass and the several trees that were nearly burnt to ash. Soft growling could still be heard as the Charmeleon and Gabite stared down each other, both refusing to admit defeat after such a long commitment. They were both shaking from exhaustion, and there were wounds all over their bodies, but the intensity of their eyes didn't waver. They looked as determined to win as they did hours ago, just as their trainers. "We have to wrap this up now," said the young man calmly. "The fires may be out, but we caused too much damage, and the local authorities should be coming soon." The girl nodded in agreement. "Fine. How about one last attack to end things?" He nodded. Blue stared into gray as the nightly wind blew their blonde hair from their eyes. Big impact. Upon impact, another shockwave blasted through the area, instantly blowing out the remaining fires, but also knocking the two trainers to the ground. In the darkness, the debris finally settled and silence reigned. For a short while, the only things the trainers heard were their own breath and the sound of their Pokemon weakly limping back toward them. Amaterasu fell into his trainer's arms and rested, just as Gabite did to hers. "Hey, Kanto boy," started the girl, breaking the silence. "What's your name?" "Isn't polite to give your own name first before asking someone else theirs." "Oh, just answer me, you jerk." He couldn't help but smile as he wrapped his arms around his Charmeleon. "My name is Naruto Namikaze, from Pallet Town." "I am Cynthia Carolina, from Celestic Town." "You're really good, Cynthia," said Naruto with a sigh. "I've been through all of the Kanto region, and I defeated every single gym without a single loss or draw. You are the first person to give me such a hard challenge since the start of my journey." She gave a small laugh. "What a coincidence. You are also the strongest trainer I've come across so far, and I came all the way from Sinnoh." Cynthia kissed her Gabite's head and held her close. "I guess Pokemon battles isn't as boring as I had thought. But don't get me wrong. You may be strong, but the next time we battle, I will be the winner." "That's wishful thinking," he simply replied. "I don't lose to anyone." "You boys are always so arrogant," she muttered, "so pathetic." Naruto scoffed and stood up with a groan. "Whatever, let's get out of here." He walked over to Cynthia with Amaterasu walking next to him. "We don't want to be caught doing this much damage. The last thing we need is to get detained in the city. I still have to finish my training here." He offered his hand to the girl, "And both our Pokemon need to visit the Pokemon Center." Cynthia stared at Naruto for a brief while before she accepted his hand. "Fine, but as soon as we get more training done, we're going to finish this battle and decide a victor." Naruto smirked and nodded, you got it. Flashback end. And after that, we basically traveled together. Brock chuckled, man, you two must have argued even more than Ash and Misty. The two mentioned teenagers smirked at each other in amusement. Naruto chuckled, we didn't argue that much, but we did have a battle almost every single day. As much as I enjoyed winning back then, it was very nice to have someone just as good to battle against. While training together, Amaterasu and her Gabite grew much stronger than before and soon they both evolved into Charizard and Garchomp. I guess you can say that without her as a traveling partner, my Pokémon wouldn't be as strong as they are now. He looked over at the clearing where his Pokémon rested and smiled when he made out the light coming from Amaterasu's tail. Our secret, if it could even be known as a secret, would be that two rivals who travel together for such a long time would make each other stronger. Kushina smiled, well, you lucked out with Cynthia. I really did. Naruto smiled back at his mother, catching the knowing smile on her face. Where is Cynthia now? Asked Mito curiously, is she in Sinnoh? Naruto nodded, yeah, she has her duties as the champion to carry out. But she's not that busy, champions don't really have much to do at most times, except for the Elite Four challenging them for the title. So she mainly travels around the world, meeting new Pokémon and training new teams. Ash smiled, man, if she really is so good, I can't wait to challenge her myself. Max chuckled, Ash, I think you'll get your butt kicked. Naruto snickered along with the others, but then felt his Pokénav vibrate again, but instead of a message, it was a call. Excuse me, I got to take this. He stood and walked over to the main road his house faced, no catching the smirk on his mother's face as she whispered something into his father's ear, no doubt that she told her husband of her most recent discoveries of her son's love life. Hey, you miss me? Of course I miss you, came a soft and affectionate voice from the other side of the call, you have no idea how quiet it is at home without you. Naruto turned around casually and saw that he was out of earshot, I miss you too, beautiful. But I must say that I'm having a great time here. Mito's really grown up a lot and I've really missed my family and friends here. Well that's good for you, but I'm bored as hell over here. It sucks that Lucian challenged me again. If he didn't that I could have went with you. You know, I was just telling the others about you. Naruto smiled softly, they actually don't know that we traveled together for so long and Mito was so excited when she found out that I know you. I think when you meet her, she'd ask you for an autograph. He looked over at Mito, who was playing with her Charmander and Dratini, she really idolizes you, the great Sinnoh region champion, Cynthia. I can't wait to meet her and your parents, she replied with a voice that practically made Naruto see her smile, we've been together for a long time now and I think it's time to tell them about us. God knows we've stalled it for too long. I'm not stalling. It just slips my mind. Naruto leaned against his parents' fence, but I would like you to meet them as well. I'm sure they'll love you. I'll come meet you when I'm finished with the battle, so around a month's time. Every time an Elite Four member challenges the champion, it would become a nation event of that region. The largest stadium would be used and tickets would be sold all around the region, so it would at least take a month's time. My grandparents will be busy, but I'll bring my sister with me. It was perhaps another secret that was hidden in plain sight. Cynthia's little sister actually lived in the Unova region. She moved there to pursue her career as a supermodel and as a Pokémon trainer. Elisa Carolina, the gym leader and supermodel, was actually Cynthia's younger sister. I think she has some performance next month in Kanto, so it works out. I think it's the Kanto Grand Festival next month, my mother is participating in it as well. Really? Cynthia asked, wow, now I really want to come. I've always been a fan of your mother's. I'll have the Cynthia's special ready for you, chilled and all. Cynthia giggled, I love you, Naruto. Naruto could only smile, I love you too Cynthia. Bonds Chapter 4. It had been a long while since Naruto had seen his mother so hysterically worried, so long he'd nearly forgotten how utterly crazy it made her look. The last time she was so worked up was when he left home to start his Pokémon journey and had actually stalled him for an hour before she let him go. Seeing her dote and cry over her other child was quite a unique experience. Instead of feeling a little sad and guilty, it made him feel really warm. His mother was truly a loving and caring mother and she wanted nothing more than to have her children safe and at home. Even with Minato holding her back, Kushina had her arms wrapped around her baby girl and continued to look over her, trying to find if there was anything she missed or lacked on her journey. Mom, don't worry, whispered Mito with a small smile, I have everything packed and accounted for. And I'm not going to be alone on the road, she continued as she gestured to Ash, May, Max and Brock, who were all looking Kushina with a little shock. They've been traveling for years already, so I'm sure I'll be fine. Ash nodded with a smile, Mito's right, and Kushina. We'll make sure she's safe and fine. We promise. Kushina sighed and nodded rather reluctantly, okay, but you have to call us every night before you go to bed. Mito smiled and nodded as her mother released her, I will, Mom. I promise. The girl patted her pant pocket, gesturing to her pokenav, in which she had saved her parents' number along with her brothers, listing them as the first, second and third speed dials respectively. Alright, I think you're good to go, uttered Kushina as tears welled in her eyes. Minato hugged his wife close with one arm as he ruffled his princess's hair, smiling down at her. I'm proud of you, Mito. Now have fun on your journey and be sure to treat your Pokemon well. I will, Daddy. Naruto smiled at his baby sister as he walked up to her, looking down the road she was going to trek and couldn't help but think back to the time he first left home. It was so many years ago, but was still vivid in his memory. Just like his sister, he had his Charmander by his side, and with a heart full of ambition and a mind filled with knowledge, he was certain that he'd succeed. He knew his sister wasn't like the old him at all, but he was even more certain that she'd make something of herself by her own terms, just as she had in their family. Good luck, Mito. Feel free to call me if you have any questions or problems. Naruto patted her head and grinned as she giggled at him, and make sure to train hard. Maybe when you're older, you can beat even Cynthia in a battle. Mito's smile grew, you got it, Naruhina. We'll see you in a month, said Minato with a loving smile to his princess. Okay. Mito started to step close to her friends as they made their way down the road. Bye, bye. Kushina sniffled, bye, baby. Be safe. I will. I love you. Naruto could only smile as his mother leaned against his father as soon as Mito was out of sight. It wouldn't be the first time he marveled at how loving and affectionate his parents were after so many years of marriage, they were still deeply passionate and in love. Despite his father's annoyance and anger of other men, all his mother's previous suitors trying to hit on his mother, everyone knew there was no risk. There was no way that Kushina would ever betray Minato's trust. That was just how true and strong their marriage was. After so many years of being together with Cynthia, Naruto could only hope that they would turn out to be as happy and at peace as his parents. Kushina suddenly pulled away from her husband's warm embrace and sent her son a stern glare. Naruto Namikaze. Cried ordered, making Naruto gulp. You're not going anywhere for the next month and the month after. I don't care if you're busy with your ice cream or traveling. You're going to stay home with me and your father, and we're going to live as a family. I won't have both my babies away from home. The young champion gulped again, you got it, Mom. I don't plan to leave for a while. Honest to himself, Naruto had really been hoping that Cynthia would grow to love Pallet Town and wouldn't mind staying for a while. He had been wanting to show his childhood home to his lover for a long time, and it would be heavenly if she would agree to build a small home there. They would still keep their apartment in Sinnoh and their villa in Unova, but having another home in Pallet Town would make him feel closer to home. In fact, I have something planned for next month. Hey Naruto, called out a sudden voice before Minato or Kushina could inquire more on their son. The professor told me to come bring you this. Tracy, the assistant to Professor Oak, smiled as he handed a small box to Naruto. He wanted to keep this safe in the lab, but seeing how you're back, we thought that it might be better for the egg if you kept it with you. Naruto gladly accepted the box, thank you Tracy. Please tell the old man that I'll take good care of this. Of course. The assistant quickly left, jogging back to the lab. Kushina smiled at the sight, having calmed from her daughter, leaving, oh, it's really been a long time since I've seen this. The mother of two will always remember how the strange Pokemon egg ended up inside Naruto's crib the moment he came home from the hospital. She and Minato had thought some stranger had made it into the house and very close to their baby, it really scared them at the time. Minato had rigged their entire home with the most advanced security technology in the world to make sure that nothing would ever harm his wife and son, but no signs of forced entry was ever detected. Seeing you with your pet egg again really makes me think back to when you're a small boy. You were so cute holding onto the egg everywhere you went, including the bath. Naruto sighed, please don't bring that up. Minato chuckled, this egg sure brings back memories. You know, I've always thought that the swirls on the egg look like our old family symbol. Kushina rubbed her chin and thought as they all made their way back to their house. The Uzumaki clan adopted the use of the whirlpool for centuries already, and it looks really close to the markings on the egg. She smiled, if this egg really can survive for so long, we could make it into a small family heirloom. Her husband laughed, sure, it would be quite the interesting gift. Naruto looked down at the egg, I wonder what kind of Pokemon is inside it. Night swiftly came and Naruto found himself inside his childhood room, smiling at the nostalgia. It had certainly been quite a while since he'd last seen his room, but none had changed with time. His mother had kept everything spotless. Just as before, the top of his dresser was stacked with picture frames depicting the various stages of his journey, his first badge, his first championship, and his Hall of Fame photo. Right next to the frames were all his gym badges, all packed neatly into badge cases from each region. And next to them was his Indigo League trophy. Almost all his accomplishments neatly placed inside his room. And now, with a strange sense of nostalgia and irony, his Pokemon egg rested next to all those achievements. In a way, it was his constant. No matter how many years he had been gone or how much he had changed, the egg had always been with him. With a smile, Naruto sat down on his bed. Even after sleeping in it the previous night, it was still much smaller than he had remembered. Perhaps the bed he shared with Cynthia back in their apartment was too big, but he wasn't used to being so close to the edges of the bed. But either way, it didn't feel as comfortable as it did when he was younger. He had a feeling that nothing had changed with the bed, it was him that changed. He had grown to like softer beds and had grown to love having Cynthia cuddling up against him for the night. Without her, all beds would feel lacking. Naruto was really starting to miss his lover and he couldn't help but reach for his phone. After 4 long dialing tones, he smiled at the silky voice of his love. "Miss me too much to sleep?" "Yes," he replied with his smile widening, "I'm not used to not having you next to me in bed." Cynthia's giggle still sounded cute over the phone. "Tell me about it. The bed is huge for only one person and no matter how I hug the pillow, it's just not the same." Over the years, the Sinnoh champion had grown used to having her lover's warm body as her personal pillow. "This makes me miss the time when we were stuck in Kalos and had to share a sleeping bag." It was a little odd for her back then, embarrassing really since they hadn't started dating yet, but the cold night never felt warmer with Naruto's arms wrapped around her. "Lucian is really going to pay for this in our battle." Naruto gave a small laugh. "Kick his ass for me, honey." "So how was your day?" Cynthia asked as she lay on their usual bed, feeling a little warmer. "Mito left for her journey, right?" "Yeah, she did just this morning." Sitting down on his small bed, he continued, "She's going to travel with a group of friends around Kanto for a while and meet us at Indigo Plateau next month." Both champions unknowingly smiled at the thought of their days together in the Kanto region, traveling around with backpacks, cooking for themselves in the forests, visiting amazing places, and challenging all the gyms. "Man, this brings me back. Do you remember the time when we went on that cruise in Vermilion City?" "How could I forget? That was when you decided stand at the bow of the ship and almost fell into the water." She couldn't help but laugh at the memory. "If Garchomp was a little slower, you would have landed in the water and killed yourself." Naruto shared a laugh. "Oh, we had a great time in Kanto. Mito is going to have a blast traveling around." "I think so too, but my parents are still quite worried. Mom especially. She doesn't want her baby girl to get hurt out in the real world." Cynthia nodded to herself. "Well, it can be a dangerous place, I guess. But she's with friends and they take care of her." Naruto paused and wondered if he should speak his mind and ultimately decided to go for it. "Hey, when you become a mother, do you think you'd have a hard time letting your child start their journey?" Cynthia surprised Naruto with her lack of hesitation. "I'd be worried about them for sure, but if they are anything like me, I wouldn't be too worried." Naruto smiled at her chipper tone, "But I'm sure their father's genes would make me worry. I wouldn't want any children of mine to go on a 20 miles hike up a frozen wasteland with barely enough equipment to scale a small hill, nor would I want to see them go spelunking into caves miles underground just so they could find a Pokemon fossil." Naruto smiled and climbed under his sheets. "So already have the father picked out, huh?" "Yes, but he's still a flight risk." Naruto could mentally see the gleeful smile on his lover's face. "Nonetheless, he's cute and sweet. And on a good day, he can probably give me a decent battle. Not to mention that he makes the best ice cream in the world. I hear that babies tend to inherit their mother's taste for food, so when I have children, I'd want a man like that." Cynthia hugged her pillow, feeling very warm. "The father, who should know who he is, should start training a Chansey for a nanny, because I want a big family. At least 4 kids, 3 boys and 1 girl." "Only 4?" Naruto added with a grin. "I'm hoping we'd have enough for a family Pokemon League." Cynthia giggled and rolled over on her bed. "Then our apartment certainly wouldn't be big enough. We'd have to get another place, a nice house with a big backyard and a quiet neighborhood where no annoying reporters would be bothering us." She gave another soft laugh. "But anyway, why the sudden baby talk? You want to be a daddy?" "I'd want to be a daddy if you were the mommy." Naruto switched off the lights and rested comfortably under his sheets. "It'd be really nice. Imagine us and our children just living together in our house with all our Pokemon around. We can teach them how to ride on the Pokemon's back and how to make ice cream with Yuki and Chichi." Cynthia could only smile at the thought of such a life. "The boys will probably want to learn how to battle, but if our little girl is anything like her mother, she'd kick her brothers' butts. And wow, there will be so much blonde hair around the house." "I would love that," Cynthia whispered into the phone. "I want that more than anything." Naruto's smile was perpetual. "I'd love to give it a try. You know me, I've always been a hardcore fan of our nightly baby-making activities." "Well," muttered his beautiful girlfriend sultrily, "if you make me a nice dinner and the Cynthia special next month, I'll definitely give you a fun NIGHT. Oh, baby, I'd teleport back to Sinnoh now if I can." Cynthia giggled again. "You can wait a month, baby." The Namekis chuckled with a sigh. "Oh, I love you, honey. I love you, too." Just like that, lying in the dark and cozy room, under his sheets, Naruto chatted with Cynthia into the night. It made them both feel more at home which, to the two of them, was where the other was. They may not have been cuddled up with their legs tangled together and all, but it was close enough. The least the voice of their other half could do was to provide them with a good night of sleep. And perhaps a good dream. It was in Kalos, Lumia City, the most romantic place in the region, also known as the City of Lights. In all of Naruto's life, that was probably one of his happiest days. Not only had he and Cynthia earned themselves a badge from the Lumia City gym earlier that day, they had the best time touring the city. For once in their very busy lives, they took time off and spent the day having fun like regular people their age. They didn't think about following their training schedule, their physical workout regimen, their activity logs for future references, they even turned down some challenges from other trainers around town. The entire day was accompanied by beautiful music and wonderful scenery. They didn't bother to go to the Pokemon Center. Instead, they went to the Pokemon boutique and shopped to their heart's content. Never had Cynthia thought her dear Garchomp would look better with a pink bow around her neck, nor with a simple crystal bracelet, but somehow, it worked. Though Naruto had a much harder time trying to convince Amaterasu to wear a beret every time he placed the hat on, the Charizard would burn it to ashes. By the end of their shopping time, Naruto had to pay for over 10 hats. "Would you buy another one?" asked Cynthia with exasperated laugh, he already burned 10 berets. The 11th one will end up just the same. "He can give up on me giving up," the young man replied with a smirk, "I will get a picture of him wearing this." "Come on," the girl muttered as she walked on ahead, "let's find something to eat." The Kalos region was the 5th region Naruto and Cynthia had traveled through together and would probably be the last before they challenged their respective regions' Elite Four. So far, it had become Cynthia's third favorite region, trailing behind Sinnoh and Unova. The food was amazing, the people were nice, the Pokemon were incredibly interesting, and the ice cream was nearly as good as the ones in Sinnoh. And perhaps traveling would feel different at age 15 than at age 11, but the entire region, especially Lumia City, felt much more romantic than any other place. "I know a place," Naruto quickly answered, "it's called Sushi High Roller. Apparently it's the most famous restaurant in town, and it doesn't serve just anyone." Cynthia was intrigued as her best friend smirked, "It only receives Pokemon trainers who have earned the title of League Champion. It can be any of the major regions, but you must have won a major Pokemon League to be able to eat in this restaurant." For once, their status as champions of the Indigo and Sinnoh Leagues proved useful for something other than their right to battle the Elite Four. That's not all, however. In order to receive service, the champions must battle the trainers hired by the restaurant, and if they manage to win, they get to have the restaurant's most luxurious meal for free. And the final twist. These must be triple battles. Cynthia grew excited and smirked, "That sounds very interesting." She gave Naruto a look, "Let's go get a free dinner, Indigo League champ." Perhaps the restaurant made some mistakes when they hired the trainers to take on the champions, because they didn't really do their jobs. Naruto let Cynthia go first because ladies first, and she had battle against a girl named Salantha. The Kalos girl was decent and was probably much better than the regular trainer, but against Cynthia's Garchomp, Melodic and Lucario, she was lucky she lasted a minute. Maybe because she was angry for having to wear a pink bow, but Cynthia's Garchomp was much more aggressive than normal and managed to defeat 2 of the 3 of Salantha's Pokemon herself with one very powerful Giga Impact. Then that last fell almost immediately after to a barrage of 2 Brick Breaks and 1 Dragon Tail. Cynthia was kind enough to wait for Naruto before she ordered, and the restaurant did its best to keep her waiting. The owner himself came out of the lounge and faced Naruto. His name was Kazu and looked a little like Jervis, Cynthia's butler back in Unova. He thought he felt the need to protect his restaurant's good name and sought to badly defeat Naruto, but he had no idea that triple battles were Naruto's specialty. More than once, Cynthia had thought to herself that Naruto may be the best trainer in the world when it came to triple battles. All his teams were built like cohorts, and each member would enhance the strength of the others. So, with his 2 Greninja and Gudra, Naruto wiped the floor with Kazu. It wasn't as short as Cynthia's battle, but it was only longer by 10 seconds. "Man, they really have great food here." Naruto sipped on a glass of cold soda as he patted his belly, "I haven't eaten this much for a long time." Cynthia was halfway through her 5th sundae and nodded with a smile, "Yeah, even the Pokemon food is great." All 12 of their Pokemon were each provided with as much food as they could eat, and they nearly cleaned the restaurant out. Amaterasu finished 8 servings by himself. "And this ICREAM." The Indigo League champion smiled fondly at his best friend, "I bet you'd rather have a lifetime supply of ice cream than become the Sinnoh champion." After taking a nice picture for the restaurant to place on their wall of fame, the duo left with full stomachs and smiling faces. They wandered through the town and took in the beautiful night lights. Prism Tower, where they both received their badges a few hours ago, acted as a tall beacon as they trekked through the busy streets filled with young couples and small families. It was unlike any other town they had visited before, none even came close. They walked a full circle around the city from North Boulevard to South Boulevard and back to North again, talking and laughing all the way, eating ice cream from each vendor that sold them. But finally, they experienced their first share of bad luck that day, or did they? Hotel Richissime was fully booked with no vacancy due to the high volume of tourists, and so were all the other inns and motels in the area. Cynthia did suggest they go to the Pokemon Center and spend the night there, but Naruto had another idea. "You're kidding, right? Oh, come on. It's not a big deal, and look at the view from here." Naruto asked his galley to teleport the two of them to near the top of the Prism Tower, right into a nice and big balcony. It overlooked the entire city and gave an amazing view of the clear night sky. "Don't worry about falling. This is a balcony and we won't roll over the 3-foot glass railings." "But I tore my sleeping bag last week, remember? I threw it out a few days ago." Cynthia sighed. "Let's just go to the Pokemon Center and you can share my sleeping bag." Cynthia nearly choked. What? "There's enough room in it," he said with a small blush as he stepped closer to the girl, "and I really want to do this. Come on, don't you want to spend a night overlooking the City of Lights? Just the two of us, looking at the stars on the ground and in the sky." Cynthia's blush almost glowed as bright as the buildings down below. "This is the most romantic city we've ever been in, and I don't want to miss the chance." Fine." The sleeping bag may have looked out of place, but having Naruto's arms wrapped around her felt perfect. It was warm and snuggly, and it was then that Cynthia realized just how amazing a pillow Naruto made. She didn't bother with the scenery, and neither did Naruto for that matter. She was a little overwhelmed by how right it felt to be so close to her best friend. She had never lied so close to him before. She could feel his heartbeat with her cheek. At that moment, just before they both fell asleep in each other's arms, they knew they were madly in love with each other. The sound of crashing waves was thundering and made Naruto wake with a jolt, but he immediately realized that he was no longer lying in his sleeping bag with his beautiful girlfriend. No, he was on his feet, standing upright. And most importantly, he was no longer in his bedroom, or Pallet Town for that matter. Nowhere near the small town would one ever find such violent and powerful waves. The ground shook as tons of water roared with defiance, and Naruto felt feeble and weak as he stood atop a cliff, as if the ground was a mere weak shield against the almighty attacks of the sea. And just like any weak shield, the ground shattered into pieces. As he fell into the dark waters and the high winds brushed against his face, he didn't feel any fear. Lightning from the black clouds illuminated the sea in a series of flashes and revealed the large forming whirlpool to him. It was gigantic, spanning nearly a mile in diameter, and spawned 60-foot waves in its wake. It was a maelstrom. It was deafening the wind, the thunder, and the roaring waves. Such was the power of nature. Just before Naruto plummeted into the deadly vortex, something swept in from under him and carried him off. "Wow, we're not ready for that yet, fish cake." Naruto had no idea what was happening, but he realized that he was riding on the back of some Pokemon. It had long wings that stretched magnificently to the sides and a wide back that provided more than enough space for him. It had a white body that had small blue flaps along its back, and it was powerful. Naruto felt the winds conform and obey the Pokemon's movements, and the waves follow after it soar. "Who are you?" His head was seriously starting to hurt and he strained to get words out, but he needed to ask. "You mean you still don't recognize me?" Naruto didn't know why, but he felt like he should know the Pokemon's name. "You named me all those years ago. How can you forget? It's me, Susanoo." Naruto's eyes widened as an old memory rushed into his mind. Susanoo was what he named his egg when he was 5. His grandfather had just finished telling him a story about an ancient clan of people who worshipped a storm and sea god whose name was Susanoo, and he decided to name his first Pokemon after such a powerful deity. "You remember me now, right?" "Of course you do. You wouldn't forget your first Pokemon." "The I were never born," he muttered as he whines and pressure made his pain worsen. "And whose fault was that?" The Pokemon flew higher and higher into the sky and soon pierced the thunder clouds, reaching the summit of a clear blue sky. "I was ready to hatch, but you were never ready. I've been trying to reach you ever since I was able to speak. But would you listen? No. You were always researching and reading on other Pokemon and how to make them as strong as possible. Then when you were older you went off and started to train all those Pokemon and totally forgot about me. And no matter how hard I tried to visit you, you were always too far away. And the few times you came back to town, all you had in your mind was that girl." Naruto was nearly unconscious from the pain, but he strained to listen on. "Miraculously, you came back 2 days ago and was finally in the right state of mind. My communications finally reached you." "What does that mean?" "It means that you have to wake up now," the Pokemon muttered before it dove down and threw Naruto from its back. "Go find me because I'm finally going to be born." Naruto cried out as he fell from the sky and plunged through the clouds, but he soon passed out. Naruto woke with a jolt in reality this time. Subconsciously, he was immediately relieved that Cynthia wasn't sleeping next to him. That last thing he wanted was to knock her from the bed. But that thought merely lingered for a few brief seconds as he jumped from his bed and sped toward his dresser. It was dark and his eyes were blurry, but he faintly heard something shaking or vibrating. His heart was beating through his chest because of the dream. He still rushed to switch on the lights before he ran back to the egg, rubbing his eyes so he'd see clearly. "Oh my god," he muttered to himself as he opened the box in which the egg rested, "this is actually happening." The egg was causing all the shaking and vibrating, but that wasn't the strangest phenomenon. It was actually glowing. A bright blue light emitted from within the shell, and even with his bright yellow lights on, it shone brilliantly in the room. The glow was pulsating, like a heartbeat. And it was becoming increasingly bright in conjunction to the increasingly violent shakes and vibrations. Naruto watched in amazement as the started to expand. One side of it was stretched out, as if something was trying to force through the shell from the inside. Some of his badges cases started to fall of the dresser, and his trophies fell to the ground, making Naruto take a step back. "What is going on?" asked a sudden voice that made Naruto jump. "What are you doing, son?" "It's the middle of the night, Naruto." "Dad, Mom," exclaimed Naruto with vigor that surprised his parents, who were both standing by his door, "come here." The champion noticed his parents' expression shift from groggy to shock and awe. "The egg. It's moving and shaking. I think it is finally going to hatch." Leonardo immediately reached into his pocket and held out his pokenav, filming the entire scene. Can't believe this. I never actually thought anything would come out of this egg. Why is it glowing?" whispered Kushina as she held onto her husband's arm and shaking so violently. Everybody's breath hitched when the first crack appeared on the surface of the egg, a small little spider crack. But soon more appeared, each one larger than the last. Then the glow became perpetual and started to shine brighter and brighter until the shell blasted opened. Minato hugged Kushina and protected her from the shell pieces, and Naruto stood in front of both his parents to keep them safe, but there was no danger, and all of them were sure of that when they turned to see the hatched egg. Luja. What if Naruto is the Pokemon champion in Pokemon End here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.